Hello, and welcome, and also first welcome Shy in a minute. Since we ran into each other, you basically sort of inspired me to go live, or definitely you had a part to play to inspire me to go live. Um, but yeah, it's definitely been a minute since I last streamed. I think it's been like 6 weeks technically. Where before that, I had a whole bunch of technical issues that I was trying to resolve, mostly to do with my internet connection, where for whatever reason, my internet would cut out at random times that I didn't really know why. I was trying to figure it out. But much to my reassurance, I guess, it was actually not a fault of my own. There was actually something physically wrong with the internet in my apartment, and like cables need to be changed and all that stuff. Oh, and also shout out to Shy. One second. If you want an excellent fitness streamer and workout streamer, Shy is definitely pretty much, in my opinion, the best fitness streamer available. They work out for their mental health, and they do intense workouts by accident. In terms of like, very often streams start off with is going to be a low-key, relaxed workout, and then a bunch of follows and subs come in, and now it's 1,000 burpees and push-ups, and then wall holds, etc., etc., which I get a lot of entertainment from, for sure. And speaking of workout streams, like I'm still in the process of bringing those back. I believe I should. I don't want to make any promises that I can't keep, but I should be able to bring them back, I think, pretty soon. I think within the next, like, 2 months. There's a gym opening up, and I'm in contact, or rather I've, like, broken the ice with the owner. And I think it looks like it's a space that I should hypothetically be maybe allowed to stream from. So I'm hoping to kind of, like, broach that topic, or, you know, basically see if I can convince them to allow me to stream there. Where it's sort of a semi-private gym. It's not like a public gym. It's actually looks like a calisthenics gym. And based off of from what I've seen, like the environment is like very open. There's a lot of like pretty much open area space for obviously calisthenics movements. I think there's even like a grass inside, or maybe it's fake grass. I don't know. But like, yeah, I'm in the process of trying to set that up, or at least seeing if I can try to set that up. But like, yes, I took a break from streaming for a multitude of reasons. One is the tech issues that were very frustrating in resolving. But I did, I think, get them resolved when it took a while to get my internet service provider to come and like check the cabling or wires in my apartment. But they eventually did. It took about 2 visits, maybe 3, I can't remember, where during the first visit, they were like, yeah, there's something physically wrong with your cabling. We need to come back with like a larger crew to like pretty much redo the entire wiring in my place. But turns out they couldn't actually do that. So they pretty much need to like, basically a whole bunch of stuff need to be rewired, or like wires need to be switched. And they did eventually do that. And so far my internet seems a lot better. There have been 0 cutouts, but I haven't tested it with streaming, although I probably should have. But I'm pretty confident that it's gonna hold. 1 second. I am a little bit rusty with streaming, so I'm probably gonna still be figuring things out as usual as we go along. But also, I took some time off, not only due to technical issues, but also, you know, when I planned to come back, like I mentioned in the Discord, you know, I felt a little bit sick or ill temporarily. But, you know, the day that I planned to go live, you know, I woke up not feeling great, and that definitely sort of killed or affected my motivation. Definitely felt discouraged. And so I figured it was like, you know, maybe it's a sign to take a break. So I did. And also I need to take a break to maybe like reassess some things, or like, you know, as you do some soul searching, so to speak, which I'm more or less always in the process of doing, where, yeah, in addition to the internet issues, you know, as as mentioned, I'm not able to do the fitness streams or the workout streams, and I want to, as in like the private gym that I was streaming from, it closed down, and that definitely, did not make me feel good, for sure. I definitely felt a sense of loss from that, where, I definitely did not, it was not at all on my radar that the private gym studio would like shut down and basically go out of business. That is actually what happened. Where like the company that owns that private gym studio, they had been around for like 5 or 6 years. It looks like they survived the pandemic, and they were opening up new locations across the world. Like they started off in Montreal, my city, and then they opened up locations in Toronto, and they did open up locations in the United States, like in Florida, Miami. So like I took that as a sign of success, where it's like, oh, they're expanding rapidly. This is probably just a reflection of my ignorance of the business world, where maybe I should not have taken that as a sign of success. But yeah, I'm happy to be back. But basically, yeah, I took a hit when the private gym studio shut down, because I really enjoyed the workout streams. I enjoy watching workout streams, obviously, and I enjoy doing them. I like that sense of community. I like sharing fitness information. I also like sharing the lack of progress in my handstands, or like, the learning process, however long it is for me to get to do a handstand. Basically I enjoy sharing my successes and my failures, or, my failures on the road to hopefully success. And so it's like, yeah, when the private gym studio shut down, and then with the tech issues, and then about 2 months ago, approximately, I was laid off from my job, the biotech company that I used to work for, I no longer work for. And the circumstances around me being laid off were definitely interesting, or at least, illuminating, and did not leave me feeling good either, that's for sure. But at the same time, I'm lucky that, I also have some savings, and also I'm lucky in that I have access to, support as I search for new opportunities or cultivate new opportunities. We'll see. But basically, I have pretty much, the next couple of months off to myself. Maybe even longer, depending. And so I thought, well, if I have this free time, what do I fill it with? I'm still going to the gym virtually every day, and I'm cultivating other things. But then I thought, well, pretty much maybe to focus more on streaming, maybe cultivating my streaming community, which I love. And so if I wanted to actually do that, I had to make the time, or at least, put in the effort to ensure that I can stick to a consistent schedule or some sort of consistency. Since like, yeah, the workout streams and the gym streams, like pretty much almost forced me into a schedule of consistency, because I had to actually like book the time, and that was like time that I literally paid for. I had to pay for the private gym sessions, so like that time was always blocked off, and so like I think I was pretty consistent, reasonably consistent with the workout and gym streams. And I thought I was building momentum, and had like really nice community. Well, I still have a nice community going, but I just felt like the fitness aspect was taking off, and then when it shut down, like I said, did not feel good. So pretty much just a culmination of things. Definitely, affected, I guess, my psychological well-being. Nothing like major, just kind of like feeling a little bit demotivated, or discouraged, which is like a normal part of life. Feelings that I'm used to, normal feelings. And so it's like, yeah, probably just need to take a break, reconnect with myself, whatever that means. Maybe focus on, I'm doing a lot of reading, although I'm always doing a lot of reading. But now I'm reading some new things, or like things on, let's say, my book list that have always been on the back burner, where it's like, okay, maybe now is the time, do the things that I've always wanted to do, but didn't have the time to do. Oh, thank you so much, Shai. Super appreciate it. Yeah, I can't thank you enough. Uh, and you know, I'm reasonably sure you pretty much relate to pretty much all of the same or similar feelings. But like, yeah, I just needed to take that time for myself, and like maybe see or reassess the situation, which I have done, or at least I think I've done. And I think at least for the next couple months, I'm gonna focus on streaming. I think pretty much I'm committed for basically till the end of August, commit to a consistent schedule, and then reassess from there. Since I have the time, and I pretty much have, well, yeah, it's pretty much just a matter of like I have the time, and I have the passion for it, and like the discouragement, or the setbacks are behind me. Where it's like I think I've solved my tech issues. I think I'm optimistic about bringing the workout streams back. And so it's like, hopefully things come together, but I'm not committed to that, or at least, I'm not putting too much focus on that. I'm just trying to roll with the punches, as they say. And like I said, I'm in a very fortunate position, that, even though I was laid off from the biotech company that I worked for, I at least was able to, save a reasonable amount of finances. And I also have access to, benefits through the government that pretty much allows me to, take some time off for myself, and also take some time to search for new opportunities, potentially new employment, we'll see. Or as I mentioned before, maybe I'll go back to personal training, or maybe something else entirely. Yeah, the struggle bus is absolutely real, for sure. And so I pretty much, for the past, I took like pretty much 2 weeks, feel down on myself, be in my feelings and process them. Not that like I put a stop to processing my feelings, but pretty much, just kind of like set aside some time, or just like sit in the, sort of like the negative feelings that you're experiencing, which I did. And then from there, I pretty much just focused on myself, getting back to a more intensive gym routine, which I have done. I'm focusing a lot more on mobility and flexibility. I'm focusing a little bit more on the handstands, and like I feel like I'm doing them at home, and I feel like I'm really close. I don't want to jinx it, but like I think in the next month or two, I'll be able to do a freestanding handstand, like basically on command. But no promises. But like I'm doing them now, like I did them earlier today. Today I went to the gym, did a regular workout, some arms and some cardio, and then I came home, did some stretching, and practiced on my handstands. Hey, I'm taking notes. I'm not only taking notes from your demonstrations, Shy, but I'm also taking notes from Mitch. Where, yeah, the qualified handstand instructor. I'll take whatever help I can get. And actually, I think what you are doing, like, I think is a good thing. Of like, I totally empathize with like being bombarded with a bunch of information. And then it's like, okay, how do I incorporate all this information? Finger spacing, pointed toes, don't arch your back, head, looking at the floor, etc., etc. It's like, okay, there's only so many things that I can think about, as I'm up in the air, upside down. I totally experience all the same things when I'm practicing my handstands. Like, obviously I know at some point, or hopefully at some point, it's going to be automatic. Yeah, lockout arms, exactly. And like, whatever, extend your shoulders or whatnot. And then obviously don't tip over, or, find your balance. So it's like, you got like a dozen you know, check boxes in your brain. Saying, okay, do this, do this, do this. And so obviously it's a huge challenge. Or at least it's an overwhelming challenge when you're in the middle of it. But have faith in the process. But I try to remind myself of like eventually it will become automatic. You just gotta hopefully stick with it. And that's what I'm doing. And I feel like it's paying off. Like I do feel like I wish I would still stream my workouts. Because like again, I really feel like I'm making progress with handstands. Even though it was my goal for 2022, as in by the end of 2022, my goal was to do the freestanding handstand or be able to consistently hold a freestanding handstand. It looks like it's going to be the same goal for this year as well, as in probably, hopefully, the next 6 months. I'll be able to check off the box of like, yes, master the handstand. I feel like it's saying, trying to teach an old dog new tricks, and feel like, yeah, 100%. And speaking of which, well, no one's getting any younger, myself included. And my birthday is coming up. And I know that age, I have to take into account that I am getting older, and age is catching up to me. So I gotta also keep that in mind. And, as I think I mentioned to you before on stream, self-compassion, easier said than done. And I have to remind myself, not be so hard on myself. Even though, like, I literally have covered it, on my own stream content, of, like, the importance of self-compassion. Where it's like, just like with handstands, I know what to do. I know the boxes to check. A matter of, like, actually doing it. That's the difficult part. Same thing. I mean, same thing with just about everything, right? With a workout routine, with a diet plan, knowing the path and actually, walking the path are two separate things, and they're difficult to connect. So, like, yeah, that's pretty much my plan, my tentative plan for the next couple of months. To pretty much commit to a consistent streaming schedule, and try to resurrect the workout streams. My tentative schedule, I'm not going to set it in stone just yet, but pretty much for now, I think I'll be streaming at least 4 days per week. I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Saturday is going to be my schedule. And I'm probably going to I should update my stream schedule on my channel. But like, yeah, that is pretty much what I'm sort of committed to right now. And obviously I'm going to be juggling other things as well, where, like I said, searching for new opportunities, a new job. I mean, I've been doing that also for the past few weeks, but not seriously, just like casually, whatever, searching the job market to see what's there. So far, nothing really catches my eye. Like, there are definitely, or at least, I don't want to be overly confident. Like, there are certainly jobs that I'm confident that I can apply for and get, but I probably would not enjoy those jobs at all. Like, that's always the trade-off, right? Or at least, that's usually one of the trade-offs. It's like, well, yeah, yes, it's a job that pays the bills, but is it a job that you can enjoy or tolerate? Hopefully it's a job that doesn't make you miserable, but I know not everyone has that luxury to, say no to a job that makes you miserable. Sometimes you literally have to take what you can get. I've totally been there. But right now I'm trying to focus on hopefully finding some sort of opportunity that I don't hate. Not that I hated working for the biotech startup. I overall enjoyed it. But like the way I was kind of like laid off, or, my treatment during the process of me being laid off, which I'm probably going to share at some point on stream. Very bizarre. Arguably unethical, and maybe legally sketchy. I did actually consult a lawyer on what they did when they laid me off. And even they were like, technically legal, but like, yeah, totally not cool. But yeah, I'm probably going to share that at some point. on stream. So, pretty much, that's the plan. And we're gonna see how it works out. You know, assuming no major tech issues or like no personal tragedy, which I'm optimistic that will happen, but you never know. I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to stick to the plan that I have for the next couple months, if not longer. Yeah, very sketchy. Well, in my opinion. I'll share the details on a future stream, but in a nutshell, what they did is like they used my likeness to market something. Like literally, pretty much used me, like my likeness, my face, for some marketing materials. But this is at the time that like it's pretty much like my last days of employment. Of like, hey, Corey Campbell's endorsing your product, but Corey Campbell's not going to be working here in like 2 days. That's sort of it in a nutshell. A little bit even more sketchier than that, but that's pretty much how it is. Of like, I do have a little bit, I have some semblance of a reputation in the industry. Nothing major. Like as in like, I have some modicum of integrity. And that's one of the reasons why like I was used. So like a year ago with this company, I was involved in other marketing materials, as in, Corey has some skills in marketing, and Corey's comfortable in front of a camera, or at least Corey can be in front of a camera. Whether I'm actually good on camera is a different story, but at least I can be in front of a camera, and I can say words, bare minimum. And so as a result of that, the company was like, hey, we're gonna shoot some videos with you. You'll star in these like marketing material videos. And that's what I did like a year ago. And like it was successful. Or at least, for a small company, it was successful. And so like fast forward pretty much a year later, there's this new other marketing opportunity. And they did the same thing. But they did the same thing, and then let me know that I'm being laid off. Technically by the book. But not, at least in my mind, not a nice thing to do. But it's okay. Like, I can take it. I wasn't like super sad about it. It's just more like giving the side eye of like, I don't think that's how you run a business, but hey, not my place to say. And if anything, it kind of like, it sort of reinforced, the notion that I've had all along of like, I don't know that I really want to work for any company, or at least if I can get by with not working for any company, or ideally anyone, but myself, then that would be my preference. Since so far, my experience with companies hasn't been overly positive. Nothing like miserable or super bad, but just like, this does not feel right for me. And I have a lot of friends and colleagues that work for other companies. And at least the feedback that I get, none of them seem to be overly happy working for these companies. Some very large companies, some much smaller, and across a range of disciplines, from like, computer science to obviously, science and tech, biology, biochemistry, chemistry. Have a lot of friends and colleagues that work for biotech companies, and like, they don't seem overly happy about it, but maybe that's just the people around me. And so it's like, I don't know if I want that for me. Even though this is something that I've pursued for a long time. And I think I've been reasonably good at it, or at least I'm happy with the work that I have done, despite me being laid off. As in, I'm, like I said, even though the company laid me off, I'm proud of the work that I did for them. I'm proud of, let's say, the customer relationships that I built through my experience with that company. And I think everyone that I dealt with, either in that company or by extension, customers in other, basically the network connections that I made, I think they pretty much all have, pretty positive things to say about dealing with me. But I could be totally wrong. I might be totally deluded. Hard to say. But yeah, all that to say, those are my plans. Those have been my experiences as of late. That, I'm kind of, I'm always going through an existential crisis, so to speak. Totally. So, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Shy. Where, even though I've known this for the longest time, or I've known this for whatever the past 20 years. Of you can't be too rigid in your thinking. And always try to maintain an open mind, but not too open. The saying of good to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. And so it's and I've also kept that in mind as I've progressed through my, my academic career and my semi-professional career, where, my original plan in pursuing the PhD was the end goal of staying at a university, becoming a university researcher, and hopefully, becoming a faculty member, or at least, doing some sort of university level teaching. And, as I've had my experiences through university, that definitely 100% changed. As in, my original goal when I started was do the PhD, and then do a postdoc. And now definitely a postdoc out of the question. And even now, the PhD is in question. I put that on hold for a year to focus on the biotech startup, or working for the biotech startup. So that's why it's like I said, I have until the end of August, because technically I put the PhD on hold till September. So pretty much that's the timeline of when I have to make some other decisions. And obviously, me working for the biotech startup, or at least committing to it for a year, full time, did not work out. But that's totally okay. I know in the end, it's for the better. And I also knew when I took that job that I was pretty much 99.9% sure that I would not be staying there for 5, 10, 20 years. As in, I almost certainly would not be making a career out of working for that company. Unless something major happened or changed, it's yeah, I know that this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life, or commit any sort of substantial portion of my life to the company. But I'm still grateful for the experiences, and they totally provided quite a bit of experience. On the whole, positive, for sure. It's actually pretty much the majority of it was positive, just up until the end, up until the circumstances of my being laid off, which is totally okay. And if anything, if the experience has resulted in me, being more committed than ever to, not working for a company, or not working for ideally anyone, well, then that's a lesson that I should incorporate. So yeah, we will see. So for this stream, I have a lot of content planned. Probably not going to get through it all. And this might be a little bit of a shorter stream, just to kind of get back into the swing of things. And then I should be streaming again tomorrow, Sunday, And then from there, tentatively committing to the schedule of pretty much Tuesday to Thursday, and then a stream on Saturday. 4 days per week, I think is like the minimum that I'm going for. And I should be able to commit. So, on this stream, what I had planned, it's in the title, like, how to be an effective science communicator. Which, like, whether I'm actually a science communicator, debatable. Maybe at the very least, aspiring science communicator. And there have been some events recently that took place that kind of like highlighted some of the challenges, a lot of the challenges in trying to communicate science and research, which we'll get into. So I can't guarantee, I'm probably not going to cover everything that I want to cover tonight, but I will just continue what I didn't cover tomorrow. So we're going to get right into it. And this will be a little, I don't know, this is like the intersection between like science and politics, where even though we like, in my opinion, we like to think of these things as like, separate entities, and just like, whatever, the scientists talk about science, and like the politicians talk about politics, and like there's just like no overlap. I think in reality, this, in my opinion, that's not true. At least, in my opinion, the personal is political. Obviously, there's a time and place talking politics, or at least, getting into political debates. But at the end of the day, I think there's pretty much at some point there's always, an overlap between science and politics, depending on what the specific topic is. And so, like, there was basically this Twitter post that I guess went viral as a result of Joe Rogan and about vaccines, etc., etc. And pretty much it begs, I think it results in asking the question of like, should scientists, debate the general public, where like, if it's in the public interest, to convince them that, this is either a thing that exists or a thing that is good, is it the scientist's responsibility to like convince or like through communication convince the general public, whatever the topic is, even something as simple as like whatever, simple and innocuous as like car safety. Of like we kind of like take it for granted now, and there are laws enforcing car safety, but that wasn't always the case. The effectiveness of seatbelts was at one point called into question, or like there was definitely people that rejected the research on seatbelt safety, but pretty much everyone now, as far as I know, like 99.99% of people, just like, yeah, they understand and recognize that seatbelts pretty much always a good thing. Same thing with airbags. But like, if you go back far enough, there were people in the opposite camp of like, yeah, you can't tell me to wear seatbelts, and it's just like, whatever, it's my personal choice. And I think you see that across a range of topics, that intersection between science and politics. And so like this article here, pretty short, a few paragraphs, I think sums it up pretty nicely, and then we'll get into a little bit of the research, in addition to like, my thoughts about it. So, and let's say the author of this article, their position is pretty clear, of like scientists shouldn't debate gaslighters, or basically their overall position, as far as I can tell. It's like, yes, science communication is good, and like, scientists should engage with the public, or let's say science communicators should engage with the public, should definitely, I definitely don't want to be the type of like researcher scientist, that like is just like closed off, and like, off doing their own research, and it's just like, there's no engagement with the general public. I think the more transparency, the more communication between, scientists and researchers and the general public, the better. Kind of like pretty much my overall principle is like an open science policy, especially when, a significant portion of research and science is publicly funded. It definitely does not make sense to me, and I'm definitely in favor of policy changing this, where it's like, yeah, at least in Canada, a large part of research, a significant portion of research, is funded by public funds, but then the results of that research is very often published in journals that are closed off to the public, or basically inaccessible to the public, or if the public wants access to them, they need to pay, and the price is typically pretty high. Like, unless you're affiliated with the university, or like you're a researcher, you're going to be paying like, $40, $50, $70 per article, depending on the journal. So it's not cheap. And so like that definitely does not make sense to me. Where I think even some of my own research that's published in journals, I think some of it is behind a paywall. Which, yeah, and totally the research that I've carried out myself personally at university was publicly funded, as in through taxpayer dollars. So like that doesn't make any sense to me. So last weekend, but this is a couple weeks ago, the 21st of June, Twitter and later the mainstream media exploded with a controversy surrounding an invitation to prominent vaccine scientist Peter Hotez to debate anti-vax charlatan and spoiler presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the podcast The Joe Rogan Experience. So like obviously this is highly politicized, and this person, the author of this article, is using pretty charged language. But basically, this scientist Peter Hotez, they are a scientist that they do vaccine research. They pretty much, that is their specialty, and they're pretty much they are devoted to making vaccines patent-free, as in pretty much available to anyone, largely developing countries. Pretty much, an open vaccine policy. Pretty much affordable, if not free vaccines for the rest of the world. That's essentially, as far as I can tell, what they've devoted their pretty much entire research or scientific career to. As in, I don't think they work for any large pharmaceutical company. I think all of the research is essentially university-based. And then on a particular podcast, as they say, this presidential candidate, they were making claims about vaccines and vaccine safety. And so yeah, there was an immediate rally around Hotez, scientists and celebrities on Twitter, and lots of discussion about why this invitation is a classic anti-science setup. Hucksters like RFK Jr. are skilled at flooding the zone with garbage. Kennedy recently told Rogan that Wi-Fi could open the blood-brain barrier and cause cancer. Absurd statements like this are a trap for scientists. The scientist wants to explain how conservation of energy works, why Kennedy's assertion violates just about every principle there is, chemistry and physics. This approach sets up two huge problems. First, it gives RFK's garbage equal footing with principles that have been established by centuries of science. The second is that to a lay listener, the scientist just comes off as fitting the stereotype of a nitpicking nerd, and RFK looks like a powerful communicator. Hotez debating RFK about vaccines would produce the same result. Like, yeah, again, the author of this article using pretty charged language. This is not language that I would use, but they're obviously pretty passionate about their position. But like, yeah, pretty much the question is, it's like, this individual, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., they were making claims about vaccines or calling into question vaccine safety. And so it's like, whose responsibility is it? Or is it anyone's responsibility to engage with that? Or you know, is it the responsibility of the experts, or, you know, I guess so-called experts, to engage with that, to debate this individual? Because like on Twitter, like the individual vaccine researcher, Peter Hotez, they were basically being called out, as in like, hey, you know, if you have issues with what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying, well, then you should debate them. You should hold, you know, pretty much, they were being called out to debate one-on-one on Joe Rogan's podcast. And they, as far as I could tell, they declined. And, you know, pretty much it's, in my opinion, like a no-win situation. Whereas they sort of say here, I'm not sure if this is my exact position or my position aligns with them, where they're pretty much, you know, they are saying that if you actually engage with them one-on-one, you're pretty much like on unequal footing, or you're pretty much giving credibility to the other person, the other party, whose information you want to correct. Where it's like, you know, is it even worth engaging with this individual when, you know, pretty much their ideas that they're putting forth are pretty much so wildly out of line with what the research says, that it's like not even worth debating or engaging with. At least that's pretty much the overall claim here. And I'm not saying that that's my position, but I think that's many people's position, and I think that's understandable. I'm not even sure what my position is. Again, as I guess maybe some sort of aspiring science communicator, where, you know, many people believe, and understandably believe or think, that, okay, well, if there are people in the general public that are misinformed, or if there are, you know, large public figures like RFK that are giving inaccurate information, well, then okay, then the actual experts should engage and debate, because, you know, the experts, many people think that the experts are the ones in the best position to, you know, debate or like debunk, you know, the inaccurate or false claims, which, you know, I think intuitively that makes sense to most people, but I think in reality, you know, that's not actually how it plays out. As in, I think there's a difference between, you know, like the experts and their knowledge and their expertise, and the ability to, you know, sway public opinion, or like quote unquote win a debate, or like sway the opinion of the general public. I think those are two separate things. As in, like, a world-renowned expert, you know, all of the knowledge and expertise on vaccines, I would say is not necessarily in the best position to win a debate about vaccines. Because as much as we like to think that, you know, it's just a matter of like putting the information out there, and like as long as you're putting out the accurate and true information, well, people will select that. I think in reality that doesn't hold true, and I do have some research like to back that up, where it's not just like follow the evidence. I think in my limited experience as someone who has done some debating, and have, you know, gone on debate or discussion panels, a lot of it, if not all of it, is about rhetoric. As in how good of a speaker you are, kind of like how confidently do you speak. Me, even just something as simple as how quickly you speak. As in, if you just have the ability, the natural ability to speak quickly and confidently, very often just that alone is kind of like enough to like sway public opinion. Where it's not just the dissemination of information. Really, it's a lot about, you know, like the other stuff, like your mannerisms, how you speak, how you hold yourself, uh, with how much conviction you speak with, of like very often, uh, what can win a debate is someone who they might be saying all of the incorrect or false things, but if they say it with conviction, that's very often enough to sway public opinion, as opposed to the expert. As a result of them being the expert, and they they have a better understanding of the limitations of their knowledge, and they'll probably speak with less conviction. That it does not come across well in kind of like a public forum debate, at least in my experience and in my opinion. And again, I think the research, some of the research bears that out, where like just presenting information, presenting accurate information, is not enough to sway public opinion or win a debate. So, as the author of this article says, I fall into this trap a few times myself. I went to the Heterodox Academy to be on a panel that also included the conservative pundits Richard Lowry and this individual, Sargon. April, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Always a pleasure to see you, both here and in Shy Stream and Celsi Stream. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm happy to be back. I took a month and a half or 6-week break. And now I'm back to making content, and I should be able to consistently make content now, at least for the next couple months. Then we'll see. This is me trying to make some semblance of a comeback to streaming. I hope you've been well. I hope your health has been keeping up. And also I'm hoping that you have more answers to your health questions, or at least you're on the path to answering. Because if I remember correctly, the last time we kind of exchanged, you're kind of in the process of diagnosis or screening, but obviously don't share anything that you're not comfortable in sharing. But either way, yeah, I hope you're at least closer to answers, if not you have answers. And I think the last time I think we spoke in Celsi's chat or Shy's chat, it seems like you were doing well, but I could be wrong about that. But I definitely hope you're doing well for sure. So I fall into this trap a few times myself. I went to the Heterodox Academy to be on a panel that also included the conservative pundits Richard Lowry and this individual, who rattled off all kinds of misinformation about COVID-19. Each thing they said would have taken 50 minutes to refute based on the evidence, though I picked one and did the best I could. By the way, they were both gracious participants and very cordial in the green room. But my knowledge of the evidence and burning desire to cite it all was no match for their rhetorical skills. Right. And these rhetorical skills, these appear to be pretty important when it comes to debate and swaying public opinion. It's not really not like a court case. Not that I really know anything about court cases, but it's not the principle of court cases of just showing the evidence, and then the jury is swayed by the evidence. It really is about rhetorical skills. Unfortunately, I broke my... Oh, I'm super sorry to hear that. I went to urgent care about 5 days later. They sent a referral to a surgeon who cannot see me until the 10th of... Oh, my. Turning red and mirrors won't heal right. Other than that, my heart goes out to you. Yeah. I can't stress that enough. Where... Yeah, not only just the breaking the finger, but the delay in medical care. That definitely breaks my heart. I'm somewhat aware of the situation in the United States, but less aware than the situation in Canada. But I suspect the situation in the United States is very similar to the situation in Canada, where, I'm probably going to cover this at some point on stream. I've covered it in the past of the healthcare system in Canada is crumbling. There's a shortage of healthcare staff all across the board at every level, from, doctors, nurses assistants, family doctors, specialists, surgeons, pretty much every aspect of healthcare professionals are understaffed. And like there's long wait times, pretty much in our hospitals, in our ERs. So it's like, I mean, I'm seeing, at least in my news feed, my Canadian news feed, I'm seeing regular stories, of like huge delays in medical care. Like I was reading a story literally, just this morning, of like a person in my city, in Montreal. They were having pretty much abdominal pain. They went to an ER. And then literally, since they were waiting in the ER for so long, their parents literally drove them to Ontario, to an ER there. They literally drove like 13 or 15 hours to go to another hospital in another province. Yeah, it's even though we're an overall different healthcare system, I'm actually gonna try and find the story. A pretty wild and sad story. Yeah, this. Which like, yeah, published today. Like I said, I was reading this morning. Where it's like, you know, they literally go to another province after like a 15-hour wait. With an ER here, they are only here to rule out and yeah. Or rather, I think, well, it says, yeah, his appendix burst. But I believe, I guess, thankfully, I think it burst when he was actually at the hospital. But it was totally like a gamble. Like they literally drove, like hours and hours away, and it could have burst, like while they were driving, and they could have been like, you know, 6 hours or like 5 hours from the next hospital. He appears to be okay. Yeah, I think pretty much the end of the story, it's like he's recovering. But like the ER that they originally went to, okay, they put out a statement. So it's like this person here, the spokesperson for the original ER that they, you know, drove away from. They put out a statement saying pretty much like the ER was overwhelmed, as they say. You know, it was at 197% capacity. So it's like, you know, like who's right and who's wrong in the situation. I think it's like really hard to say. Like obviously, like this shouldn't happen. Okay. But I like just as like my heart goes out this individual for having to go through that, like my heart also goes out to like the healthcare professionals that like are overworked, and like stressed to the limit. It's like it's a no-win situation for everyone involved. I'm just like super thankful, at least for me for now. Like I don't have to deal with that. That can change at any moment, but right now, like I'm pretty good. So for abdominal pain, you get a CT. If there's no end damage, you are sent home. Even if you are liver enzymes at 400, yeah, like I know pretty much, generally speaking, the ER is like there to ensure that, you know, pretty much triage you of like, are you an actual emergency or not? And if they rule out any immediate medical emergency, and they'll typically like refer you to a clinic, or they'll say like go see a regular doctor or medical professional. And so it's like I totally understand your concern of like having to wait, not only just wait, but now you have to deal with a broken finger for like a month or so, a little over a month. I'm like, yeah, totally understandable. I would be super nervous about it not healing right. I wish it wasn't that way. And whatever, I'm hoping I guess that there's like some cancellations and that your appointment is moved up. Ooh, yikes. Yeah, totally understandable. I would hope that the pain is managed. I think generally speaking, they're good at managing that type of pain. Where I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably confident that even if they do have to break it again, it should be. Oh, right. Okay, yes. They might be able to get away with some local anesthetic. I don't know. I'm just totally like thinking, speculating in my brain because I'm not a medical professional in any capacity whatsoever. But like I'm hoping at least some sort of like local anesthetic. Maybe not something that needs to be processed in the liver. There should be some. I don't know for sure, obviously, but there should be some solutions for that. It definitely seems inhumane or barbaric if they have to break your finger and they can't appropriately manage your pain. Yeah, I'm sorry you're experiencing that. You know, it's interesting because like I very often, you know, run into individuals. Well, individuals from the United States who like make the claim, and I guess it's probably understandable from their perspective that that healthcare in the United States is like the best in the world. But then I also know stories like yours, and I also know other people with similar stories like yours that are also from the United States. You know, as someone who's in the chronic illness community and pretty decently involved in the chronic illness community. I know of many people in the United States that are really struggling to get appropriate medical care. And so, if that's the best in the world, well then, that's very deeply concerning to me. I'm sure they can do something there in office if they had to set it again, but in the meantime, they just say, "Oh, take ibuprofen," and then yeah. Even like I don't know, so I don't know if it's your experience. Like I know you can't take ibuprofen, but when you were able to, if at one point you were able to, even though I'm technically not allowed, or rather, me taking ibuprofen or aspirin is contraindicated, because like as someone with Crohn's disease, NSAIDs or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, Advil, or aspirin, there's the risk that it might make it worse. And so very often I get like the recommendation that like, oh, if I'm having pain, then take Tylenol. I'm like, Tylenol, like I've never noticed anything from Tylenol. Where when people say like they take Tylenol for a headache, I'm like, what do you, like Tylenol actually does something? I've never taken a Tylenol and have ever had any sort of effect from it, as far as I can tell. Me, Tylenol is just like me eating whatever candy. Even worse than that, because it doesn't taste as good as candy. But like, I feel no effects from Tylenol ever. But yeah, when scientists refuse these debates, the other side gets the opportunity to say that they are turning them down for fear of being challenged. The opposition can claim to be just asking questions, even though they don't care about the answers. But these reactions are preferable to giving them a platform. Well, yeah, so definitely, like especially if you have any concerns with your liver, like, do not take Tylenol. That I can say with a high degree of confidence of like Tylenol is processed in the liver. Oh, there's nothing to apologize for. It's not a derailment. You know, I'm lucky now, or rather I'm grateful now, that like pretty much the majority of my pain issues have been resolved. Not all of them, but pretty much, you know, basically the pain management that I needed like 5-10 years ago, and I no longer need it now, thankfully. know, I've also gotten to a place you probably can empathize of like just, you know, my daily life has like some baseline level of pain that I just like have sort of gotten used to, or like I understand like this is my life. Oh, Jason Society, welcome. Happy to see you. Shout out to Jason Society. I am doing well. Thank you so much I hope you're doing well. This is pretty much my first stream back after about a month and a half break. So thank you so much for passing by. Super appreciated. Super grateful. And I should be streaming way more regularly for the next couple of months. And like, if you're still holding Stonercast, I'm almost certainly going to reach out to you if you would have me on. There's a whole bunch of content that I have planned and I want to start doing. And I hope you're doing well also. I'm definitely, I don't always make my presence known in your stream, but I am typically lurking in your stream. Hey, any help from pain is better than nothing though, especially when, yeah, absolutely. Like pain management is tricky. Where, you know, at least for me, it's always been like a trade-off. Like, okay, like, yeah, I need to take this to manage my pain, but it also like makes me super drowsy, or like, you know, it affects, you know, my cognitive abilities, etc., etc. Oh, good. I'm super grateful to hear that. Where it's like, yeah, it's always been on my list of things, of content, to be on Stonercast. Since like I know you want to talk about the effects of cannabis from a scientific perspective. So like, yeah, I'm adding to the list, and I'm gonna hold myself accountable, and I'm totally gonna reach out if you'll have me on again. Yeah, totally. I know many people use cannabis or cannabis products to manage their pain, and many people swear by it. Especially many people like they say it's like pretty much like the best pain management that they've ever had. And like I know someone, a close personal friend, that has pretty much like a spinal cord injury, that has a lot of issues with chronic pain and chronic pain management. Like pretty much cannabis has allowed them to really like improve their quality of life, and they're pretty much like their overall functioning, where it's really allowed them to be way more independent, just like through pain management alone. Yeah, it's tricky, where that's the trade-off. Like, obviously, you know, cannabis should be legal, and nobody should be criminalized or punished for consuming cannabis. But it's not like, you know, this 100% risk-free thing that like, you know, has like no negative effects whatsoever. It's obviously like case-by-case basis, etc., etc. But I think like for most people, especially those with chronic pain and the ones using it for managing chronic pain, like it seems like, again, from the stories of the people around me, like the benefits seem to really heavily outweigh any of the negatives. Yeah, 100%. I think that is like the best recommend. You know, obviously, you know, depends on where you are. Obviously in Canada it's different, where like you can actually go to your doctor, and whether your doctor is informed or is able to help you, different story, but at least you're not going to be stigmatized or criminalized. So I think that's good bare minimum. And we're really in the infancy of like cannabis research, and really understanding like where can we use it in the best cases, either for chronic pain, sleep, etc., etc. We're really just still trying to figure out of like where's the best place to use it. where does it have the best therapeutic benefit? So wrapping up this article on like debating, the last kerfuffle is another reminder of something important that science has not solved. There are few figures who are rhetorical matches for merchants of doubt, like RFK Jr. Most scientists aren't prepared to take on his fire hose of nonsense. The scientific community desperately needs equally skilled pundits to defend science. There was an effort to draft the political commentator Jon Stewart to debate RFK, but Stewart didn't seem too enthusiastic. This is an important challenge for the world of science to work on. In the meantime, we can be gratified at the way scientists and clear thinkers rallied around Hotez and his poise in the face of all of the online abuse he endured. Where it's like, yeah, at least in my experience, okay, and I think I have more experience than the general public as someone who's gone on many discussion or debate panels. Like, to really win a debate, especially a debate about vaccines, like I said, you don't just need the knowledge, you don't just need the expertise about vaccines. You need, as they say, the rhetorical skills. You need actual debate skills, which is a totally separate skill set or toolkit entirely. And I have totally confronted that challenge, or at least have come face to face with that challenge. You know, when I actually first started streaming, like within a couple of months of me starting to stream, and this was like in 2021. This is basically during one of the heights of the pandemic. Like, I think that was like the start of like the Delta or the Omicron wave. I can't remember at this point. But like, yeah, during like my first few months of streaming, which like I pretty much like got into streaming to share a vaccine and COVID research. And like I did my first debate within like 3-4 months starting to stream. And I remember that debate. Where it's like, you know, I did a lot of research, and like I was really confident in my knowledge of like, hey, you know, I felt pretty much sort of a similar experience of like, you know, me walking into an exam when I was doing my bachelor's degree, of like, hey, I'm ready for this exam. I have the knowledge. I'm confident that I'm gonna ace this exam. I'm gonna do well. But like, you know, I definitely came face to face of like, yeah, the knowledge and the expertise only gets you so far in a debate, especially in a debate that's kind of like geared towards the general public. You know, it was not a scientific debate. It's not like a debate that I would see at an academic conference, you know, which I have attended. It's not a debate where the audience is other researchers and scientists. And totally my debate opponent, like, I have no problem admitting that their rhetorical skills are way better than mine. Like 1,000% better than mine. Way better speaker, way more charismatic, way more aggressive and assertive than I am. Where it's like, yeah, even though I was confident in my knowledge, way that they were speaking, the rhetoric that they were using, the confidence that they were speaking with, and even just the pace that they were speaking, like totally, I think I arguably, or at least understandably to some people that were watching that debate, I lost that debate. I have no problem admitting that. Maybe one day I'll go back and revisit it, because like I believe my debate opponent got from Fabian Liberty. They have a YouTube channel. I think the debate is on their YouTube channel. And maybe one day I'll go back and like, you know, watch it on stream, and maybe see what I could have done better at the time. But, like, that was kind of like one of my first early reality checks of coming face to face with this aspect of rhetorical skills, where it's like, yeah, you know, scientific communicators, or these scientific communicators that have the intention of, you know, swaying public opinion, it's not necessarily a matter of like knowledge or expertise. There appears to be some aspect of rhetorical skills. So it's tricky. And that's why it's like, I think this is kind of like a no-win situation. Where it's like, is there a part of me that says like, yeah, they probably should have accepted the challenge. Peter Hotez should have accepted the challenge and gone on the Joe Rogan podcast and debated Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Okay, there's a part of me that says that, but then there's totally another part, and I think this is probably like, it's kind of like where I'm split, where I think I'm 60-40, where I'm 60% or like 55%. It's probably better that they don't go on. They probably made the right decision in not engaging with them. Oh, thank you so much, Shy. Hope you have a lovely evening, and shout out to Shy again. Excellent fitness streamer, and also Canadian, most importantly. So all the more reason to follow them. But yeah, you definitely had a great workout. I hope you have a lovely evening. I hope you get some great sleep, or at least some semblance of good sleep. Like, I know sleep has been a challenge for both of us, or almost perpetually a challenge for both of us. So I'm hoping tonight is a night of good sleep. Or at least, well, I hope all your nights are nights of good sleep. But I know, at least for me now, I also take what I can get. That's also another thing that I've been focusing on during my time off with streaming. Of like trying to get my sleep in order, which I think that I have. I've been trying to like stick to like a sleep schedule, trying to like force myself to like get some good quality sleep. And the past few days have been pretty decent, not great, but decent. Where like I am getting like a good 5-6 hours of sleep, which is like a decent bare minimum for me. Definitely not my best, but at least I can function on that. And it does not make me absolutely miserable. So now, why am I saying like pretty much I'm sort of like 55% of like not engaging with that? Of like, you know, pretty much burning down the debate. Okay, so I'm gonna dive into my reasons why. So, one of the reasons, okay, is highlighted here in this article. I think this is a pretty cool article. Or rather, I should say study. There's also this other article here that's also pretty much covering genetically modified foods, where it's like, okay, so the title of this study, extreme opponents of genetically modified foods know the least but think they know the most. And this was published, I think, in like a few years ago. It's not a super old article, like 2015, 2016. Trying to find date. Well, whatever. Not a huge deal, but it's a fairly recent article. But this one is older than that. This is like 2003. Yeah. Like this article came before this one. But like this one, which is more recent, I think like at most like 2015. I think it's closer to like 2017, 2018. And it highlights, you know, a very interesting phenomenon. Both, you know, scientifically interesting and like psychologically interesting. Of like, as they say here in the opening of the article, there is widespread agreement among scientists that genetically modified foods are safe to consume. and have the potential to provide substantial benefits to humankind. Where it's like pretty much, genetically modified foods have been around for decades. Um, and like they're pretty much like universally accepted as safe. Even though, like, in my opinion, the term genetically modified foods is like a very broad term, doesn't have much meaning. Because like you can genetically modify a food in an infinite number of ways. A genetically modified food that produces a poison, obviously human poison, obviously unsafe. But pretty much as far as I can tell, all of the genetic modifications that have been put forth on food, it's typically to make them, as far as I can tell, more nutritious, easier to grow, etc., etc. Where like pretty much all beneficial effects in terms of genetic modifications. But there's hesitancy or concerns about them, where there are clearly people that are staunchly, if not extremely, against genetically modified foods. And so it's like, what is it that is driving this concern or extreme opposition to genetically modified foods? And as they sort of highlight here, where I'm going to go through it in more detail, but like they pretty much highlight the fact that like when they actually, when they focus in on the individuals, that they identify themselves as like extremely against or in opposition to genetically modified foods, when they test their knowledge, when they test both their broad scientific knowledge through a quick questionnaire, and when they test their more specific knowledge, as in specific in regards to their knowledge about genetics, they appear to be lacking in knowledge, or rather there is a discrepancy between what they think they know and what they actually know. As in when you ask them, and that's what they did in this article that we're going to get to, when they asked the people that they were surveying of like, hey, how much do you think you know about, let's say, science or genetics or genetically modified foods, they will self-report that they know a lot. Pretty much self-proclaiming that they're kind of like, quote-unquote experts, or like very knowledgeable. Not actual experts, but like they're very confident in their knowledge. But when they're actually tested, like they're pretty much failing the test. It's like, oh, their professed knowledge versus their actual knowledge is like there appears to be like a wide discrepancy. Yeah, which like that is understandable, like 100% understandable. Where it's like, especially when it comes to humans, like, yeah, as a biologist / biochemist myself, like I would be hesitant to have my genetic information modified. Okay, like I'm definitely not going to be the first one signing up saying, hey, genetically modify me. Like for sure, there are valid and understandable concerns there. But when it comes to food, that's where it's a little bit different. Where again, like genetically modified is like a very broad term, and there's like an infinite number of ways that you can genetically modify a food. Pretty much universally, they've been modified to be better in virtually every way. Oh, the peer review, welcome. Shout out to the peer review. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for passing by. Always great to see you. Yeah, exactly. Like that's why, like I think the term like is kind of like in my opinion, it's like a useless term. Because like I said, there's like an infinite number of ways that you can genetically modify. You might as well just say modified foods, personally. Like you can pretty much bake into anything in the term genetically modified. So like, yeah, as they say here, genetically modified foods are judged by the majority of scientists to be as safe for human consumption as conventionally grown foods, and have the potential to provide substantial benefits to humankind, such as increased nutritional content, higher yields per acre, better shelf life, and crop disease resistance. Where it's like, yeah, as far as I can tell, all of the genetic modifications of foods have taken place in that vein of like, how do we make them better? Either, more nutritionally, whatever, dense or greater nutritional content, as they say, higher yields, or like disease resistance. So like the crops being more robust, and thus like obviously higher yield. Where it's like, those are good genetic modifications. In the United States, a poll by the Pew Research Center found that 88% of scientists thought genetically modified foods were safe to eat, while only 37% of lay people thought so, the largest gap for any of the issues tested. And even then, this actually seems quite low when it comes to even just polling scientists. 88% of scientists. I would hope it'd be higher, but even the term scientists spans such a wide range of qualified and unqualified people, in my opinion. The lab created media. So, like, I totally understand your concern, April. Like, I am not going to be an early adopter of lab-grown meat. Not that I'm concerned about any sort of negative health effects. Like, I know enough in terms of like how it's cultured or how it's going to be cultured, and I am sort of following the research on lab-grown meat. And actually have an article that I've wanted to cover for a long time about a big step in the development of, quote-unquote lab-grown meat. Most of my concerns come from, like, basically how close is it to, the actual meat in terms of, like, whatever, protein, nutritional content, health effects, etc., etc. Yeah, and that's, like, another thing to keep in mind. Of, like, with growing... with already a huge issue with antibiotic resistance. If we can use less antibiotics in not only just animal agriculture, but agriculture at large, that is a good thing. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, totally. Like, I will absolutely be doing a full report on lab-grown meat. Rest assured. That I can pretty much guarantee you. Yeah. I would suspect as much. Like I have pretty much all of the faith that it's going to get there in terms of pretty much becoming on par with actual meat. But I'm also going to be concerned of like its actual like footprint. Of like, yes, almost certainly it's going to be like way more environmentally friendly than whatever traditional animal agriculture or conventional as it's practiced now animal agriculture. But I'm curious to see like from beginning to end or like whatever from lab to mouth. What are its actual, what are the actual inputs, and its actual footprint, where it's like, just as, in my opinion, at least from what I can tell, even though there's this push for electric vehicles, I don't think, I'm reasonably sure that, the solution to our climate issues is not having everyone move to electric vehicles. Like, it's an improvement for sure, and I advocate for that, but I don't think that is, let's say, at least for me personally, that's not the optimal outcome. Because I think there are other effects that we need to take into account. Or like, again, for sure it's an improvement, but I think it's just kind of like a little bit of a band-aid solution. And I have a little bit of a concern that, you know, this lab-grown meat might be a band-aid solution, where I don't know if it's the solution that, like, oh, once we have fully equivalent lab-grown meat, that's either like, that is both on par nutritionally and taste-wise, and price-wise, that, like, if everyone just transitions to that, well, then our problems are solved. I'm hesitant to make the claim that it's gonna play out like that, or at least I want to see actually how it's going to play out, and see some of the research, if or when it's available, on like how it's produced, what the actual inputs are, when it's produced, etc., etc. Like I said, I have like virtually no doubt that it's going to be way more efficient. I'm just curious on like how much more efficient it's going to be. Yeah, like it's going to get there. I have faith that it's going to get there. So yes, where was I? So yeah, polling, you know, scientists, the vast majority of scientists, although I think it should be higher than 88%. But either way, there's a huge discrepancy between scientists and the general public. Pretty much less than half of science, in terms of percentage, of lay people thought so. Whoopsies. Public opposition to science is often attributed to a lack of knowledge. Right, so I think that is I think the popular sentiment of like, hey, you know, if the people, if the general public are not on your side about anything, let's say in the scientific world, for example, climate change, genetically modified foods, vaccines, you know, pick your topic. Well, then it's just a matter of knowledge, and we just need to be better at getting the knowledge out there, and, you know, the opinions and the public perception will follow. I don't think that holds true, as we're going to see. However, findings on the association between knowledge and attitudes about genetically modified foods are mixed, and there is little evidence that educational interventions can meaningfully change public attitudes. Sometimes they even backfire. While research on opposition to genetically modified foods has primarily focused on what people actually know, it is also important to consider what they think they know. Self-assessed knowledge is a strong predictor of attitudes, and people tend to be poor judges of how much they know. They often suffer from an illusion of knowledge, thinking that they understand everything from common household objects to complex social policies better than they do. This is why people's sense of understanding decreases when they try to generate explanations, and why novices are poorer at evaluating their talents than experts. Gaining knowledge in a domain often has the effect of revealing nuance and complexity, hence reducing extremity of belief. These results suggest that extreme attitudes sometimes reflect low objective knowledge paired with high self-assessed knowledge. Right. So I think they're touching upon something I think a lot of people know. Maybe not enough people know, but I think a lot of people are aware of like this effect. You know, the quote-unquote kind of like Dunning-Kruger effect. Of like, you know, those who make the claim to know the most tend, when you assess them objectively, and to not actually, you know the most. And that, you know, having in-depth knowledge, or like being an expert in whatever field or discipline, tends to kind of have this moderating effect, or rather tends to like decrease the chances of you being extremist in your, you know, positions or viewpoints. Kind of like often attributed to the fact that like if you're an expert, you tend to be aware of like your knowledge gaps, so to speak. Of like, yeah, you might know a lot about the topic, but part of that knowledge is knowing how much you don't know. And so you tend to be pretty cautious. And a lot of this stems from this study and this phenomenon. So like this study was published before this one. So before returning to this one, just gonna read the abstract of this one, because I think this is like a good example of like it's not just a matter of like, you know, presenting the information or presenting the evidence or presenting the research, because like that's pretty much what they did in this study here. That's why they say in the title, the need for a new strategy, because like they literally tried to like change people's positions just by information alone, or rather through providing accurate information. And turns out that wasn't enough. It's like, yeah, the people, the individuals were not swayed by just like, hey, you know, here's the accurate information. You know, you're missing this information. You know, we've, let's say, identified gaps in your knowledge. We're going to fill those gaps in knowledge. So here's the information, and then you'll be convinced and you'll come to our side. It didn't turn out that way. I'm gonna have to check that next time. I can't even remember the last time I bought cereal. Even though I love cereal, I don't buy it just because if I have it in my place, I'm probably gonna eat the entire box as soon as I buy it. So it's like I'm just gonna not buy it. But I'm gonna have to check that. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Although isn't like virtually every cereal, well, not the cereals that I buy, but isn't like virtually every cereal like derived from corn, or probably like the large majority. But like, yeah, cereal's tricky. Or like, yeah, these most cereals, or at least most good tasting cereals, not good nutritionally, that's for sure. I have no problem admitting that I do enjoy. Like I said, I don't buy cereal anymore. There's a reason, and the reason is because like, yeah, it's just like I'm just gonna eat the entire thing. Like I'll buy like a family size box of Reese's Puffs, Reese's peanut butter puffs, and it'll be all gone in less than 24 hours. And so it's like better to not have the temptation. Same thing with potato chips. Like I love potato chips. I just don't buy them just because I typically can't have it sitting around in my place. So in the past, communication strategies aimed at facilitating consumer acceptance of genetically modified foods have focused on technology-driven, top-down practices. The utility of these practices in influencing the extent to which consumers accept specific genetically modified foods was tested in attitude change experiments involving 1,655 consumers from Denmark, Germany, Italy, and the UK. So like, you know, I would say somewhat culturally distinct countries. Maybe not the most unique, but I think it's fair to say that these are somewhat culturally distinct countries. Different information strategies were tested against a control group for their ability to change consumer attitudes. No attitude change occurred. Rather, results indicate that all strategies had a uniform attitude activation effect that significantly decreased consumers' preferences for genetically modified foods as compared to the control group. So it almost had like the exact opposite effect of what they intended. Of like, you know, they had every intention of like, you know, providing information in the hopes that it would get them on their side, pretty much, you know, get them to be less hesitant or less oppositional to genetically modified foods. And it seems like you're basically just activating a defense mechanism. Or like just by virtue of sharing accurate information, people become defensive. The discussion focuses on why technology-driven information strategies have failed to convince consumers of the merits of genetically modified foods, and relates these results to recent changes in consumer policy that are aimed at engaging consumers in the debate about innovation processes, rather than attempting to align their views with those held by expert communities. And so it's like, yeah, I don't think this phenomenon is unique to genetically modified foods. I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably sure. And another reason why I say that, and this is like kind of like a totally separate topic, but a topic that I'm passionate about, and I think it's also another good example of like people just kind of like, it's not that people listen to experts. It's like people choose the experts that they want to listen to. Let's see, where is it? Yes. Right. So, if anyone's been around long enough or has seen me on panels, discussion panels long enough, I have a very firm position about any sort of child corporal punishment. And, I think this is also a good example of, like, it's not just a matter of presenting the accurate information or, like, the scientific research. Because, like, I encounter it all the time of, like, here is my research package of, like, the dozens and dozens of studies showing that, hey, pretty much you should never strike your child or subject your child to any sort of corporal punishment or harsh parenting. And the response I get is like, yeah, I'm not convinced. It's just like, whatever. And like, I think this is also a good illustration of just like trust an expert. And it's like, people just happen to choose, and I'm probably guilty of this at some point, maybe even now. But like, yeah, people just happen to choose the experts that they want to listen to, and they will filter out, the experts that they just put on the label of like not trustworthy. Where it's like, pretty much virtually everyone nowadays, okay, in this study, they were basically, assessing kind of like trust in experts. And it was coming from the angle of like, hey, even though the research is pretty like robust and clear, and we have, multiple expert institutions saying, hey, from the American Academy of Pediatrics to the American Psychological Association, putting out statements saying, hey, no childhood corporal punishment. You should use other things to discipline your child, and that there should be no physical aspect to disciplining your child, including spanking. So even though, like, the institutions and the experts are pretty unanimous and united that, hey, this is what the research says, there's still this prevailing sentiment among the general public, among too many in the general public, that, hey, like, corporal punishment of children is effective, and that it can lead to good outcome. So pretty much, the exact opposite of what the research says. But in this study here, they were pretty much like confronting people with experts of like, yeah, they got a bunch of experts in car seat safety, and pretty much virtually everyone, at least as far as I could tell, virtually everyone unanimously agrees that, car seats for children, safe, good. Every child should be in an appropriate car seat, for their safety. And that I think pretty much, even though obviously there are laws now in place, but let's say even if there were no laws, I think virtually everyone, would agree that, like, if you're not putting your child in a car seat, it's like, that's dangerous. That is not a good thing. Almost certainly abusive to some extent. And so it's like, when the experts, convey this message, pretty much everyone agrees. Like, oh yeah, like, I'm in alignment with the experts on this topic, on car seat safety. But when they switch the topic, okay, they still gather the experts, and the experts are united in their messaging. Like, hey, the experts say, like, pretty much no childhood corporal punishment. Spanking bad. And people just reject, they now reject the expert. They accept the experts when it comes to car seat safety, and that messaging. But when the message is different, but the experts are still united, and more or less like unanimous in their messaging, well then people reject that messaging. So it's like, they're just like leading with their bias, essentially. And so that's why it's like, I think it's clearly tricky to engage with the public, in scientific issues. And especially like when you're being called to debate, or a scientist is being called out to a debate. It's like, how do you handle that? I think it's a no-win situation. And like I said, I think the overall right call was made of like, yeah, this is an individual that I probably should not engage with. That's like, they're pretty much, at least in my opinion, just a straight up like liar. And they don't appear to have a commitment to honesty. So, continuing with this, where was I? Yes. We hypothesized that extremists will display low objective knowledge but high subjective knowledge, and that the gap between the two will grow with extremity. So in study 1, we surveyed a sample of US adults, about 1,000, representative of the population for gender, education, income, and ethnicity. Hypotheses and analysis plans were pre-registered on aspredicted.org before data collection. So they pretty much it seems like they laid out their positions before collecting data. Participants were either assigned to a study about genetically modified foods or climate change. We first present methods and results for genetically modified foods, then climate change. So they assessed 2 topics, as they say, genetically modified foods and climate change. And I would say, arguably, one is highly politicized, and one, I would say, much less so, if not, I would say, largely apolitical. As in, the genetically modified foods, I would say, is largely apolitical, as opposed to, the climate change one, I would say, highly political. And the authors themselves, I would say, make the same claim, and you'll see that this kind of the politicalness of the topic appears to have some sort of effect on the outcome. In the genetically modified food study, participants were first asked 2 questions to measure attitude: extremity of opposition to genetically modified food, so how much are you in favor or oppose genetically modified foods, and also how concerned are you. So 1 is no opposition, or basically acceptance, and then 7 extreme opposition, and then concern. 1 is no concern, and 7 is extreme concern. Overall, about 90% of respondents reported some level of opposition to genetically modified foods, and about 93% reported some level of concern. Basically, a high overlap between if they're understandably, if they strongly oppose it, and they understandably have a lot of concerns about it. As they say, responses to these 2 questions were highly correlated, and we averaged them to form a measure that we call extremity of opposition for the main analyses. Consistent with previous research, there were no significant differences in extremity of opposition between self-reported liberals, moderates, and conservatives. So it's it seems like there was kind of a united front, as in basically political affiliation appeared to have kind of no moderating effect. Next, participants were asked to judge their understanding of genetically modified foods, self-assessed knowledge, using instructions and a single item rating scale adapted from the cognitive science literature. Finally, we measured scientific literacy, that is objective knowledge, with 15 true-false questions adapted from the National Science Foundation's Science and Engineering Indicator Survey, the American Association for the Advancement of Science benchmarks for science literacy, and recent work on the public understanding of science. For example, electrons are smaller than atoms. We measured responses to the objective knowledge questions on a 7-point scale, anchored by definitely true and definitely false. Participants were given -3 to 3 points depending on correctness. For example, when a participant chose definitely true, they received 3 points if the correct answer was true, and -3 points if the correct answer was false. We summed points across all questions to measure scientific literacy. For robustness, we replicated all analyses after binarizing the scale and treating scores of 1 to 3 as correct and scores of 0 to 3 as incorrect. Interesting. So it seems like, if I'm understanding this scale correctly, there's more options for incorrect than correct. Because you have 0 to -3, so basically 0 is marked as incorrect. 5 of the items in the scientific literacy scale refer to genetics. For example, all plants and animals have DNA. We summed responses to these items to create a genetics literary subscale. For robustness, we also replicated the analyses after removing the genetics questions from the scientific literacy scale. So, Figure 1 shows average self-assessed knowledge of genetically modified foods and average scientific literacy by extremity of opposition. So they're referring to this figure here. I should probably highlight. So you have two graphs. You have extremity of opposition on the x-axis, on both x-axes. And then, so the difference is you have the objective knowledge, so their tested knowledge, and then the self-assessed knowledge, so how much they're professing to know. So if you just like compare the extremities, as in the ones who are extremely opposed, okay, you see pretty much they have the lowest objective knowledge. You pretty much see this trend, this downward trend. As you go to, more opposition, you go to less objective knowledge. But then the opposite trend, when it comes to self-professed knowledge, as you get more extreme in opposition, the more you profess to know about the topic or have knowledge about it. So pretty much, yeah. The more you claim to know, it seems like the less you objectively know. Which they pretty much summarize here. Repeating these analyses using the genetic subscale instead of the overall scientific literacy scale produces nearly identical results. So yeah, they did two kind of like sets of questionnaires or tests. One test was like broad scientific knowledge or scientific literacy, and then a more focused test because like this is about genetically modified foods. So like, hopefully they'd have, more domain specific knowledge, as they say, of like, hey, if you want to like have a position about genetically modified foods, hopefully you have some knowledge of genetics or knowledge relating to genetics. So like they did another assessment of kind of like domain specific knowledge, and pretty much they got identical results, as in like the more you are opposed to genetically modified foods, it seems like you have the least domain specific knowledge, or like relevant knowledge to the issue at hand. Next, we tested whether objective knowledge predicts self-assessed knowledge differentially at different levels of extremity of opposition. We did this by regressing self-assessed knowledge on objective knowledge, extremity of opposition, and their interaction. Figure 2 shows the results of this analysis, with lines representing predictions at the 10th, 50th, and 90th percentiles of measured extremity of opposition. The interaction is statistically significant, indicating that the relationship between objective knowledge and self-assessed knowledge differs by extremity of opposition. Extremity of opposition. Sorry. Well, yeah, they're pretty much like graphing the relationship, and it's like, yeah, a statistically significant relationship. Objective knowledge is a significant positive predictor of self-assessed knowledge up to an extremity of opposition value of 4.77, but becomes significantly negative at an extremity of opposition value of 7. For extremists, knowing less is associated with thinking one knows more. So it's like, yeah, there's, kind of like there appears to be like a little bit of an overlap of like at the lower levels, as they pretty much they're giving like an actual value of like up to a 4.77 of like kind of like approaching on the fence. Your objective knowledge appears to match your self-assessed knowledge of like, yeah, you're not extremely opposed, okay, maybe a little bit against, but at least it kind of like tracks with your knowledge of like, yeah, maybe I don't have a strong position, or I'm just like slightly against, but maybe I recognize that I don't know a lot about the topic, as opposed to like pretty much like the more extreme that you go, like pretty much it falls off, kind of seems like precipitously, of like, hey, you've like you've dug your feet in the ground, you're taking this extreme position, and like, yeah, you have kind of like significant gaps in your knowledge, or you seem to know the least. Methods and measures in the climate change study were identical to the GM food study, except that the two extremity measures asked respondents to report their concern about and belief in human-caused climate change. Both measures were coded such that higher numbers indicated greater divergence from the scientific consensus. The correlation between these two measures was 0.83, and they were averaged to serve as the extremity measure. Unlike beliefs about genetically modified foods, climate change beliefs were highly polarized by political identification, with conservatives much more likely to oppose the scientific consensus than liberals. Which, like, yeah, at least not surprising to me. Like genetically modified foods, I would say fairly politically neutral, okay, as opposed to like climate change, highly politicized, or like highly politically polar topic. The pattern of results is directionally the same as for genetically modified foods, but not statistically significant, as extremity of opposition increases. Scientific literacy decreases, while self-assessed understanding of climate change increases. Interesting. As a result, the gap between blah blah blah. Okay, so it's like not as a robust or strong a finding as the findings with genetically modified foods. So it's like, yeah, the overall trend is there, but there's a little bit of difference when it comes to the specific topic, the political topic of climate change. So as extremity of opposition to genetically modified foods increased, objective knowledge of science and genetics decreased, but self-assessed knowledge increased. For climate change, the direction of the effects was the same, but the results were not statistically significant, so like not as robust. The lack of relationship between scientific literacy and extremity of anti-scientific consensus climate change beliefs is consistent with previous findings, and we believe that this is attributable to the polarized nature of the climate change issue. For highly politicized issues, ideological commitments may crowd out effects of individual knowledge on attitude. We discuss this interpretation in more detail below, along with additional analyses of how the effects of knowledge on attitudes interact with political identification. The remainder of the studies focus exclusively on genetic engineering technology. So in study 2, measures similar to those in the genetically modified foods condition of study 1 were collected as part of a larger survey using samples from the United States, France, Germany, representative of age, gender, and income. The measures were different because this study was planned and executed independently. The use of different measures across studies provides evidence that the results generalize across different operationalizations of the same constructs. Objective genetics knowledge was measured by the percentage of questions correct in a 10-item true-false quiz from Eurobarometer. Self-assessed knowledge was measured by asking how much do you know about genetically modified food on a scale from 1, not at all, to 5, great deal. Knowledge difference scores were calculated by first z-scoring objective and self-assessed knowledge within each country, and then subtracting each participant's objective knowledge score from their self-assessed knowledge score. Extremity of opposition was measured by averaging across 12 items, 3 about willingness to buy genetically modified products, 5 about desire to regulate genetically modified products, and 4 about willingness to actively oppose genetically modified products, for example, by participating in a public demonstration. So, basically, overall, on the whole, carrying out the same type of analysis, but in different countries. France and Germany. Now you can see that maybe there's some slight differences. The overall trends appear to hold. Where if you compare France, Germany, United States, starting with, top, their objective knowledge, and you have extremity of opposition on the x-axis. The overall trend appears to be conserved across the countries, but I would say, more dramatic in the United States, where it's like, in France, there is a little bit of a slight downward trend as you get more opposition, your objective knowledge decreases. The same thing holds true in Germany, but the level of their objective knowledge appears to be just overall higher, where basically, you see this overall downward trend, but it pretty much matches the highest objective knowledge in the United States, where it's basically the least the individuals in Germany with the least objective knowledge are equivalent to the individuals in the United States with the most objective knowledge. Basically, the least informed in Germany are equivalent to the most informed in the United States, on this particular topic. And pretty much the same trend holds true. I would say, more conserved when it comes to self-assessed knowledge, where it's in France, Germany, and the United States, as you get more opposed or you get extreme opposition, your self-proclaimed or self-assessed knowledge appears to go up. Where it's the ones most opposed are the ones who make the claim that they are the most informed or the most knowledgeable. So it's finally we tested the interaction between extremity of opposition and objective knowledge on the self-assessed knowledge that we found in study 1. We found a similar pattern, but only for the US sample. Regressing self-assessed knowledge on country, objective knowledge, extremity of opposition, and the interaction between extremity of opposition and objective knowledge reveals that the relationship between objective and self-assessed knowledge differs by extremity of opposition, shifting from positive to negative as extremity increases. Running the interaction model separately for each country shows that the effect is driven by a significant interaction effect in the United States, replicating study 1. There were no significant interaction effects in France or Germany. So again, the trend is there, but it doesn't seem like it's as significant in comparison to the United States. Or in comparison to the United States, it does not appear to be significant. The results mostly replicated the finding of study 1, although we did find some differences between the patterns of effects in the United States versus France and Germany. In all countries, self-assessed knowledge increased significantly with extremity, and the gap between self-assessed and objective knowledge grew. Objective knowledge decreased significantly with extremity in the United States. However, in the European countries, although the direction of this effect was the same, it was not statistically significant. So same trend, basically not statistically, basically not as robust as what you find in the United States. To develop a better understanding of the reasons for the difference, we looked at a large publicly available data set the Eurobarometer 64.3. This survey assessed objective knowledge using the same items as Study 2 and extremity of opposition in 25 countries, including France and Germany. There was a highly significant negative effect of extremity on objective knowledge for genetically modified food in France and in Germany. In fact, in 20 out of the 25 countries, there was a significant and negative effect of extremity on objective knowledge for genetically modified food. In addition, Study 2 included one other measure of opposition. The first question every participant answered was a simple agree or disagree question as to whether or not they were opposed to genetically modified foods. Opponents in all three countries scored lower on objective knowledge compared with supporters, and this relationship did not vary by country. The difference between opponents and supporters' objective knowledge was significant in the United States and Germany, and close to significance in France. Taken together, we believe that the weight of evidence favors the interpretation that in Europe, as in the United States, objective knowledge decreases with extremity of opposition, and the non-significant effects in Study 2 are probably false negatives. Okay, interesting. We ran a near replication of the GM, genetically modified foods condition of Study 1 to resolve two unanswered questions. First, one possible interpretation of the relationship between extremity and self-assessed knowledge that we found in Studies 1 and 2 is that it is an artifact of the order in which we ask the question. According to this interpretation, respondents may give a high rating of opposition and then feel compelled to justify this rating by giving a high judgment of self-assessed understanding. To test this alternative interpretation, we reverse the order of the opposition and self-assessed knowledge questions. So interesting. That's pretty important factor to consider. Just like the order of the questions, kind of like a little bit of a post hoc rationalization. Of like, if you ask the first question of like how opposed or how supportive or oppositional are you to genetically modified foods? Well, okay, if they say that they're strongly opposed or extremely opposed to genetically modified foods, but then there's this follow-up question of like, hey, how much do you think you know, let's say about science or specifically about genetically modified foods? Well, they might be incentivized to say that they know a lot, to basically not to kind of like save face of like, hey, I better justify my position and say it's like, yeah, I know a lot. So they pretty much are trying to address that issue by reversing the order of the questions. Second, the scientific consensus surrounding genetically modified foods concerns their safety. It is possible that genetically modified opponents object to genetically modified foods on alternative grounds, such as environmental, social, or animal welfare concerns, and view safety as a secondary or even irrelevant issue. If this is true, their lack of scientific and genetics knowledge may not be relevant to their attitude. To address this possibility, we included an additional question in this study, asking people the primary reason for their opposition, with the following options: food safety, health concerns, moral, religious concerns, animal welfare concerns, environmental concerns, social, political concerns, and others. Right, so that's another aspect to take into account of like, their position may literally have nothing to do with like scientific literacy. They may just be on principle, maybe just by virtue of their ethics or morality, that they are extremely opposed to genetically modified foods. Maybe on the most extreme end of like if they're extremely religious, they might view genetic modification as going against God's plan or something, as like a more extreme justification. And so it's like, yeah, scientific literacy may have nothing to do with that. So like they're trying to assess like what is the root, or hopefully what is their motivation that is driving the position that they've taken. The results are described in detail in the supplementary information, and we summarize them here. First, the results were almost identical to those from Study 1, which rules out the interpretation that the effect is an artifact of question ordering. Second, 73% of respondents cited food safety health concerns as their reason for opposition. Extreme opponents were actually more likely to cite food safety health concerns than moderates, and the main results replicate when we restrict analysis to the subject of participants citing food safety health concerns. This rules out the possibility that extreme opponents view safety concerns as irrelevant to their attitudes. People are more accepting of medical applications of genetic engineering than food applications, which is interesting. Because I'm pretty much whatever, the opposite. I'm way more accepting of genetically modified foods than genetic engineering of, let's say, humans. This is not to say that I am against genetic engineering of humans, although my position is pretty complicated. But like, you know, when it comes to the medical application of genetic engineering or genetic modification, I'm all in favor of that. I'm all in favor of, you know, safe gene therapy in the appropriate circumstances. And I've even covered some of that research on stream. But, you know, I'm not going to be the first one to sign up for it, or, you know, I'm going to make sure at least, or rather, well, I will probably never sign up for it if I have no medical application for it, as in I don't actually need gene therapy. But let's say if I were in a position to require gene therapy, like unless it's like a life or death situation, I would be like pretty hesitant or like on the fence about it. Like I would want to make sure that I do my due diligence before I actually consent having it done. But I also know that for some people, depending on the disease or condition, like they have no choice, but to like subject them to pretty much seek out gene therapy. So this raises the possibility that genetically modified foods are a special case, and that the effects we have documented may have limited generalizability. We therefore ran an additional study to test whether the effects we found in studies 1 to 3 generalized to another application of genetic engineering technology, gene therapy, which I just mentioned. This study used identical methods to study 1, except that instead of genetically modified foods, we asked about gene therapy using language from the Mayo Clinic. Gene therapy involves altering the genes inside a human body's cells in an effort to treat or stop disease. As expected, opposition levels were significantly lower than for genetically modified foods. Interesting. However, we also found precisely the same pattern of relationships as in studies 1 to 3 between extremity of opposition, objective knowledge, and self-assessed knowledge. I was like, yeah, it seems like people were more open or more accepting of it, but still the trend was conserved. Those who were most opposed to gene therapy for humans, seems like they had, you know, the least knowledge, but they'll claim to have the most knowledge. Extreme opponents were less knowledgeable and thought they were more knowledgeable than moderates, and they were also poorer at evaluating their level of knowledge. Complete methods and results are in the supplementary information. Across 4 studies conducted in 3 countries, we found that extreme opponents of genetic engineering technology display a lack of insight into how much they know. So it's like kind of, well, it's basically a blind spot. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And kind of like it's an illusion of knowledge. We next report additional robustness analyses, provide an in-depth discussion of the differences between genetic engineering and climate change, and discuss the implications of our results for science communication. One possible interpretation of the results is that they reflect differences in education, rather than science or genetics literacy per se. To test this possibility, we reran the main analyses from all studies, including education level as a control. All the key findings remain significant. All analyses in the main text use linear models, but there is some evidence of non-linearity. For example, the uptick in self-assessed knowledge for those scoring 1 or 2 on extremity of opposition in Figures 1. We therefore conducted tests of quadratic effects to provide a better understanding of any nonlinearities in the data. For self-assessed knowledge, in all studies, there is a significant quadratic effect of extremity of opposition. For most of the range, the effect of opposition on self-assessed knowledge is positive, but the relationship turns negative at low levels of opposition. Thus, the interpretation based on the linear model that self-assessed knowledge increases with opposition should be qualified to acknowledge that this is not true at very low levels of opposition. For objective knowledge, we find some weak evidence that the effect decelerates as extremity increases. This effect was marginally significant in Study 1, significant in Study 2, and not significant in Studies 3 and 4. Contrary to genetically modified foods and gene therapy, we found no significant effects of knowledge, objective or self-assessed, on extremity of climate change attitudes. The lack of an effect of objective knowledge is broadly consistent with previous data. The null effect has been attributed to cultural cognition. When an issue becomes polarized, people's attitudes reflect affiliation with their ideological group and not individual knowledge. So it's like basically groupthink, where like they're not coming to this position based off of their knowledge, or not rooted in knowledge, but just by the fact that whatever. Since this is the trend in their political sphere, they will go with that trend. That is, individuals subscribe to whatever their in-group believes, regardless of how much they know about the issue. There is even some evidence that scientific literacy can promote extremity consistent with the community's position, even if the position is counter to the scientific consensus. This may explain our results as well. A recent analysis of data from the General Social Survey examined the relationship between scientific literacy, political affiliation, and extremity of counter-scientific consensus beliefs across a range of issues such as genetically modified foods, climate change, evolution, and the Big Bang. For most issues, including genetically modified foods, there was an overall negative relationship between scientific literacy and opposition to the consensus, consistent with the idea that knowledge plays a role. However, half of the issues also demonstrated an interaction with political identification. The relationship between knowledge and attitudes was weaker for the political group holding the counter-consensus position, suggesting that ideology can diminish effects of knowledge. This interaction effect was strongest for the climate change issue, where conservatives actually showed an opposite effect, an increase in extremity with scientific literacy. Interesting. Where it's like, it seems like they were literate, and despite the literacy, they were pretty much in opposition to the scientific. There was no interaction for genetically modified foods or for nanotechnology. Respondents from all political groups showed similar decreases in knowledge with greater extremity. These two issues were also the only two that were not polarized. We reanalyzed our own data from Study 1, including interactions with political identification, and found similar results. For climate change, liberals and moderates showed the common pattern we find for genetically modified foods. The less people know, the more opposed they are to the scientific consensus. Conservatives, however, show no such effect. In fact, the effect is trending in the opposite direction, although not significantly so. As in, like, seems like, they have the knowledge, and yet despite the knowledge, they're still opposed to it. Thus, the net effect of scientific literacy on extremity is negative, but weak and non-significant. In contrast, for genetically modified foods, there are no interactions at all by political identification, which makes sense because this issue is not polarized along partisan lines the way climate change is. We take these results as evidence that knowledge and ideology both contribute to polarization and impasse around divisive science and policy issues. The relative strength of these forces seems to depend on these issues. Right, so even then, even though we're finding this effect of, let's say, political or your ideological affiliation, uh, that pretty much affects how you interact with the topic. Whereas, as they pretty much explicitly say and find in this study, where it's like, yeah, when it comes to a politically charged topic like climate change, well, then your political affiliation is having an effect. As opposed to if you move it, if you change topics to something that is less politically charged, or basically not politically charged, like genetically modified foods or gene therapy, well, then people are less, it seems like less biased by their political affiliation. Or basically, it's more driven by the knowledge, or maybe lack of knowledge, as opposed to, political affiliation or like groupthink. So it's like, even then, it's not like a binary where it's like, political affiliation is, biasing the way you interact with this issue or topic. It also depends on the topic, on whether, that specific topic interacts with politics, or is perceived to interact with politics. A traditional view in the public understanding of scientific literature is that public attitudes that run counter to the scientific consensus reflect a knowledge deficit. Right. So it's like, yeah, if you're like opposing the experts, or your views or positions are different than the experts, well, that reflects some sort of knowledge gap, or as they say, knowledge deficit. Science communicators have made concerted efforts to educate the public with an eye to bringing their attitudes in line with the expert. These initiatives have met with limited success, which has led for calls to abandon this approach altogether, where it's like, running on this assumption that, hey, we just need to inform people, provide people with the information, and then they'll start agreeing with the experts, or coming on the side of the experts. And that appears to be explicitly not the case. Our findings highlight a difficulty that is not generally appreciated. Those with the strongest anti-consensus views are the most in need of education, but also the least likely to be receptive to learning. Overconfidence about one's knowledge is associated with decreased openness to information, right? Because if you already think that you know everything, or like there's not much more you need to know, then you would understandably be closed off to new or additional information. Because, like, what can this person teach me if I already know, or I'm close to knowing everything on this topic? This suggests that a prerequisite to changing people's views through education may be getting them to first appreciate the gaps in their knowledge. Where it's like, sorry. I'm curious. I don't think doesn't seem like they tested that. And I wonder if there's a study out there. But I wonder, I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably sure that if you point out the knowledge gap, or like, you point out to people their deficits in knowledge, I suspect that they probably won't recognize it, or like they would even call that into question, or they might become very defensive, because not many people like to have their ignorance kind of like pointed out to them, or maybe put on display, or like their knowledge called into question, especially like if they think they're knowledgeable, and you're actually pointing it out to them, like, hey, you don't actually know as much as you think you know, or like you know even way less than you think you know. I can see that potentially backfiring. So again, I think this is a cool study. There are other studies that I want to go over. Probably not going to be on this stream, think I'm gonna wrap this one up in a moment. But you know, this phenomenon has been replicated. This kind of like, as they say here, this kind of like overconfidence, where it's like, you know, you think you know something and you're highly confident that you have knowledge, but then again, when we go and test you, it doesn't seem like that knowledge holds up. Um, and it's like, yeah, you know, maybe our approach to scientific communication is all wrong, and that's why it's like, you know, I go back, or you know, highlight the fact that, you know, it seems like rhetorical skills matter, or like, you know, how you deliver that information matters, or like how do you get someone to be open to new information. I don't have the answer to that. I wish I did, because that's kind of like a problem that I'm trying to solve. Where, like, as they say, the people that most need the education, they're kind of like closed off being educated. Where, like, you know, even though this study is highlighting a phenomenon of, like, you know, overconfidence in knowledge, and like, you know, having low objective knowledge, even if you were to point it out, you know, this type of research, I think even this research, I've highlighted this section here, the acknowledgements, because I think even that would be called into question, because, you know, it was funded by certain institutions, that I think people would, you know, like, the whole institution of science appears to be being called into question, where like there is a significant portion of the population that just no longer has trust in scientists. And even though, like, there's research like this saying, hey, you know, we want to educate you, you know, but it seems like you're not open to education. And like there's this phenomenon that's occurring, they would probably even call this into question, just by virtue of the fact that, you know, it's whatever, sponsored by specific institutions, even though it's I think mostly publicly funded. They say the John Templeton Foundation. I'm not familiar with the John Templeton Foundation, or if there's any sort of political affiliation of the John Templeton Foundation. But like, yeah, you have a grant from Humility and Conviction in Public Life. Not familiar with this institution. But like, yeah, also University of Connecticut, the Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility at the University of Colorado, and a National Science Foundation grant, and then also an SSHRC grant, and that's actually in Canada. I think the Social Science Humanities Research Council of Canada. And so, like, even then, I think, you know, people would call even this research itself into question, of like, hey, I don't even trust this research, even though it might be pointing out, you know, a bias that I have. Well, like, this research itself is biased, so like, you know, I can discount my own bias, or like the bias that they're pointing out, you know, doesn't exist. And so, like, even a lot of people, a significant portion of people, just also no longer trust universities, or like the research that is coming out of universities, since like they think, or like they're under the perception, that, you know, research has like this, the research that's being published has this political or social agenda. This is not to say that, you know, all research that's published is good and trustworthy. Absolutely, 100%, definitely not the case. And I try to point out, you know, cases of bad research. Obviously, I can't point out all of them, but I do try to highlight noteworthy incidents of like bad research, unethical research, bad scientists, unethical scientists. But like, on the whole, you know, pretty much the majority of science that's published, you know, good and overall trustworthy. But like, yeah, you know, as much as trust could be reestablished with the general public, I I don't know how to go about doing that. And I think even though science is providing some answers of how to do that, or like the institutions of science are providing answers of how to do that, and are pointing out biases, etc., etc. But like, if the trust is gone, and the people don't trust the research coming out of the institutions of science, well, it's like then it seems like it would almost be impossible to regain the trust of the public that has lost trust. Say scientific institutions, or like the scientific endeavor, or like pretty much scientists as a whole. So it's a tricky problem that I'm gonna come back to tomorrow, because I don't think I have time to cover this research here in as much detail as I would want to. So I think I'm gonna end the stream here. Yeah, but we're gonna cover this paper tomorrow in depthly. I think it's a really cool paper posted in the Discord by Bob Marley. Shout out to them. Like, yeah, if you want to join the Discord, there's the link. I plan to be way more active in the Discord moving forward, at least for the next couple months, hopefully longer. But yeah, that's going to be it for this stream. Let's see if I can find someone to raid. I don't think there's... Yeah, I don't think there's anybody raid currently. So yeah, I'm gonna end it there. I will be back tomorrow around the same time. I'm gonna post in the Discord when I'm gonna go live. I plan to go live around 7:30, 8 p.m. Eastern. Might be a little bit earlier, might be a little bit later. But like, yeah, I do plan to go live again tomorrow, covering this research in depthly, and other research also in depthly. But probably starting with this, because whoopsies. Because this falls in the same category as pretty much the topic that we're covering now. Like, yeah, good to be back. I plan to be back with more regular content, like I said, for the next couple months. And thank you everyone for stopping by. The peer review, Jason Society, April, Shy, can't thank you enough. Super grateful to have you pass by. And yeah, until next time, take care, be well, be kind. And also, yeah, shout out to you, Jason. Super appreciated. Yeah, take care, be well, and I will be back.